This week on the ProtoPod, we're joined by Richard Sumnall, founder of RackFalcon. With 2 decades of experience managing large-scale security operations across Europe and North America, Richard launched RackFalcon to address a critical gap in securing physical equipment in data centers by providing precise, automated tracking of individuals near sensitive hardware. Richard, welcome on the show. Richard, welcome into the ProtoPod. Really excited to chat with you today. You were talking beforehand about your very unique and broad resume, and I'm excited to learn more.
Great. No, thanks. I'm happy to be here. Thanks very much for inviting me.
So I know that you have an engineering background. That's where your educational background is. And then you have a long career, in larger companies, servicing a few different industries. And now you're the founder at RackFalcon. Can you walk me through what your career progression has been like and the path that led you to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really fun, but it's been, I think, all over the place is probably the best way to describe it. I went to university to do engineering, and you can tell from the accent that was not in the US, that was in English. And I really enjoyed the course, but I just didn't want to be the guy at the time that did like the tiny nut of the one thing. As soon as when you start a career, you'd be the tiny bit, and so I kind of bailed on it, and it was a bit of a mistake in hindsight, because what I didn't know then is your start of career in anything that you do is always going to be that tiny bolt. So that was a bit of a mistake, and I went into management consultancy, and boy did I realize that was a mistake. After doing a couple of years of just constantly spreadsheeting and PowerPointing for other people to save and make money that wasn't me. So that was like 2 or 3 years of that, and I thought, I just can't be doing this for another 35 years. And so I had a complete change of direction. It was like a midlife crisis by age 25. And I joined the police, and all my friends and family thought I was losing the plot, really. I got a motorbike and joined the police, and that was it. But I loved it, absolutely loved it. And I spent 10 years in the UK police in London. And it was like a paid tourism gig. It was like just nothing you've ever seen or since or before. So I lived and breathed it for 10 years, and absolutely, what can be better than like locking up bad guys that deserve it? I loved it. So the problem, though, was that the organisation is not great. It's quite slow, lumbering. It's been there for hundreds of years, and you very much are like one cog in a wheel. So despite loving the work, it took me this time 10 years to think, I don't really fancy another 25 of this. Mostly just the organisation rather than the work. And so I left, and I ended up joining Uber at a time when they were really in their sort of super growth mode. Travis was still in charge, and it was another complete change of pace. I went from the slowest moving organisation there is to probably one of the fastest, and it was a whirlwind. But again, I loved it, because I was one of the first kind of physical security hires outside of the US, and they just kept throwing countries at me. They're like, oh, by the way, you've now got Pakistan. Okay, but I've never been to Pakistan. Yeah, it doesn't matter, just get on with it. And so it was really, really fun. I started in like a law enforcement liaison role, and then they kept throwing more things at me. They threw that physical security at me, and that's kind of the first time I got into what does that actually mean? Like it kind of sounds like it should be relevant because you've been in the police, but it's quite different because you're on the complete opposite side of it. And so it was trying to work out what does that mean in terms of like protecting buildings, people. And at the time there was a lot of protests in Uber. There's a lot of taxi drivers not happy about this new business model, and in some of our countries like South Africa, they would just set fire to the other cars. And so and the office. So it was like, well, I went from a fairly sort of lumbering organisation to this thing where all hell was breaking loose every week, and it was like it was really full on, and kind of meeting lots of like Middle Eastern, which some of those countries I've never been to before, and I found myself sat in a room full of like intelligence agencies in the Middle East. So I was like, ooh, what's what is this? So really loved it, and did a few years. It was included a move to Amsterdam from London, because that's where their kind of EU head office is. And then I moved to Palo Alto Networks, which was sort of a bit less crazy, to be honest, but equally interesting, because they had a big, and they still do have a big office in Israel. And so there was a lot of, this was before the big event in Israel, but there were still rockets flying around, and so that was also really interesting around how do you kind of deal with that. And it was like the challenge there was around kind of cultures. So if you're Israeli, that was perfectly normal to have rockets coming overhead, but that is not normal for any visitors. So then that was sort of like, how do you cope with that? And then I took a job with Cloudflare to head up their physical security. And again, it was like a change of pace again. All the office stuff was similar, but then they have 600 plus data center sites, but they don't own any of them. They are tenants in all of those places. And so the challenge there, which was leading to the RackFalcon piece and the Protocase piece, the challenge was, well, how do you secure your equipment in somebody else's building? And it was surprisingly difficult. Like when I joined, I'd only been in data centers a small number of times, and then they became my kind of life. And I was like, well, this is a real challenge, because all the existing security stuff that I was used to is really built for the site. Like it will secure the outside perimeter of your site. It will, you can put cameras up, but once you put 200 different customers in that one space, now you've got a problem, because that camera is trying to cover 200 different customers. And if that customer, which was us as the tenant, wants footage, well, you can't really have it, because for privacy reasons, if I give you footage, I'm giving you footage of everyone. So you're like, well, this doesn't actually, I can't actually get the hold of the footage. And it's the same for like the logs of who was there. And so the other complication is, it's actually really hard to secure a cabinet. And so you find that a lot of people just don't. They basically leave the manufacturer's key in the cabinet.
Fingers crossed.
I mean, you can get these keys off eBay. They're basically worthless. But then you've got a big long row of cabinets, like 200 cabinets in a big long row, and they've all got the same key. And you're like, I get that the building is secure, but there's quite a lot of people in here now. Everyone is sending their engineers, everyone's sending their third-party contractors. There must be, I'm thinking, there's at least 1,000 people a quarter in this room.
Yeah.
And I don't really have any control over who they are. Like the building is secure, but once you're in there, it's a bit of a free-for-all. And I was like, I wasn't loving it, and that was my challenge. While I was at Cloudflare, I was like, how do you secure these then? So I kind of went back to first principles, I guess, back to my kind of engineering days before this big long story, and thought, well, like, what would I have? What would I have if I don't know, if money was no object, or like building something was no object? How would I actually secure this thing? Oh. And if you think about it from a both security and compliance, trying to hit your certifications kind of problem set, you think, well, what I really want to know is, as I want to know, forget badges, forget cameras, like forget all that. I just want to know who is at my equipment, for how long, and ideally why. Now, how do I put a system together that does that. And I sort of it took a long time to kind of get with different pieces. You know, can I use a badge system? Can I use a lock? How do I fit it? The other problem is I need it to be super scalable. I need it to be super easy to install, because they're you know, these sites are on the other side of the world. So I need something I can ship and install and be up without needing a really complex custom install to happen that adds a load of cost. And so basically I came to the conclusion that the best, or the way that I could think to do this, was to do a facial recognition sensor / camera inside the rack, and then anyone that's going there would pre-register and upload their face before they visit the rack. And then that equipment then would then catch them, ideally know who it is from the pre-registration process. And then if I tie that to like a Jira or a workflow, I also know why. And then I'll just need to work out on a technical basis, how do I get this how long piece? What I didn't want is what most cameras will do for you, which is like event, spam. I don't want that. I want tell me that Richard has arrived and then tell me how long he's there. So I want like one line of data basically. And what this is all kind of coming to is, effectively I want physical presence. So the presence of a person turned into one single row of data. That's the end game. And so I was like, how do I get that? Because once I have that, I can alert when I don't know that person. So that's the security side of it. And then, you know, you could call up or notify the site there's an unknown person. But with that one row of data, well, I can do lots of things with that now, just as you would in like the InfoSec world. I can then feed that into the InfoSec SIM as a one line of data. I can tie that back to the work order, and I can see how long that person was there for. So once you've got that physical presence converted into a single line of data, first seen, last seen, and why, it sort of releases a lot that you can do with that, and it kind of solves the problem of basically having no idea who's there. So that was the aim, and then that was the goal. And so I left Cloudflare just over a year ago. So the problem was, I left Cloudflare. I decided that I was going to try and make this thing a real thing, solve that problem, get that one line of data per person, and try to make this a product. But how? You know, like when you think about, okay, I know where I need to end up, but that's a long way away from where I am today. You know, I can buy a piece here, but how do I put a system together? And it was a challenge, and it was a pretty big challenge, where basically you go back to your engineering roots and just kind of say, well, let's break that challenge down into lots of different pieces, and you have a big long list. Okay, I need to figure out how to mount this thing in some kind of box that is installable and easy. I need to have a back end that receives this data, and that's easy to say. Well, just give me a back end. Well, that's with no real coding experience. That's not something I could just rustle up. So you get this whole list, and you go, well, okay, I could buy a camera that will get me somewhere, and then basically go down the list of each of these component pieces and say, well, how could I get something that gets me towards the solution? And basically involved a lot of learning how to code, or at least how to get AI to help me to code. This is absolutely not a vibe coding thing. It's not kind of just build me and then it produces some sort of slop. It was 10,000 messages to GPT over the year to say, I specifically need just this tiny piece now. Help me with this tiny piece, and then kind of iterate on that. And it basically was my mentor of how do I set up a AWS split stack. And I learned how to do GitHub. I'm like, okay, this is a complete mess. I need a much better way of doing this. And so that was into GitHub, Git Actions, and I became like this sort of, I guess, amateur to start with, but reasonably becoming competent engineer to get to this end game, all towards getting to this system, which became like an obsession, really. I want this line of data for each person, and it's like a sort of 7 days a week. And if you speak to my wife, she'll tell you that he's gone a bit mad with how obsessed he became with that. And so then that kind of gets us to, I guess, to Protocase. Well, like, how do you, when you've got the hardware pieces together, which you know, it has to be a specific type of camera. I'm not playing at this. I don't want some sort of joke camera from China or some cheap thing. I need an enterprise grade system. So like the only ones really, like, the problem with the cameras is that they will generally send data and images to the manufacturer's back end, like a Picard camera will send it to the Picard system. That's no good for me, because it means I can't change it to be on my back end. So that was a whole work stream. Like, how do you do that, and how do you get it securely into your hack? And then you learn all the infosec side of it. But once you've kind of landed on a way to do that, you get to, okay, great. Well, I now have a front end, a back end, and a camera. How do I put it in this cabinet? Or how do I put it in a case? Like, how am I going to physically arrange this? And it presents another problem. And at that point, you just don't really need another problem. Like, it's enough to do all these different things. 10,000 messages later, you're kind of a bit tired. Like, I don't really want to try to go into the garage and try to build something that looks half professional. I have enough problems on the software side to be trying to do that. So I looked for solutions around, like, how could I sort of fast track that, really, and get some help. And that's when I came across Protocase to put together what would normally look like a server. Is a sort of server shape, and that's intentional, so that if you ship this thing to a rack, the guy on the other end that receives it goes, oh, I know what to do with this. It looks exactly like a server, and it can just plug into one.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, so I thought, well, that's good, because now it's like super easy to install. It solves my problem there. Like, I shouldn't have to, run the guy through some custom install. It doesn't need to be a specialist. It can be pretty much anybody, or at least it can be the guys that are working on that cabinet anyway. They're used to putting servers in. So I'll make a server-sized box, and then I will mount the pieces in there, was the thinking. And then I was like, well, okay, it'd be much quicker, faster, better if I get someone like Protocase to help me. And I had a couple of calls, and to be fair, this is not, I don't get paid for this, but they were really, really good, because they kind of immediately got the concept. After enough of my rambling, they were like, oh, no, I get it. There's a design guy called John, who's really, really good. And he just goes, okay, this is how we would do it. Do you agree? Well, he first asked, actually, do you have any drawings? Absolutely not.
Up here.
I've got nothing, John. I've been too busy trying to code on AWS. I do not have any drawings for you. And he's like, yeah, no worries, no problem. I only asked that in case you had something already in mind. Here's what I would do. And it was almost immediately spot on. A bit of tweaking here and there. Just need to move that. Just need to make sure that this is, right in the center for my use case. But it was, less than half an hour. And then you just basically press go, and it wasn't even that long, maybe a week later or something, a beautiful first version of RackFalcon 1U unit appears on my doorstep. for me to just assemble. And when I had tried to do this kind of myself with some prototypes, it's a complete nightmare because this piece doesn't fit that piece. It nearly fits, but not quite. So now I need to buy another piece to fit. I've got to wait another week. There was none of that in the case of Protocase. Like, as described, because John had done such a great job, it just appears, and I just plop all the pieces in that just fit beautifully. And then suddenly this thing became kind of physically alive, and it was ready to go, really, which meant that I could then say to people that I've been talking to about this concept, other companies, some of my previous employers, like, hey, I do actually have a kind of prototype version, or as I developed a kind of minimum viable product for you to check out. What do you think? And at that point, I had the confidence that I was not sending them some sort of half cobbled together sort of thing that screams amateur, Like I had put a solid year of work into this. I did not want them to look at it physically and go, ugh. I wanted them to think, okay, this is a serious piece of kit, and that's what Protocase gave me. That it gave me a number of units which were ready to go and ship, and that's what's happened. So they are live in 3 different tech companies, either labs or office or somewhere that they are testing them. They're not yet in like full production locations, but they are in their labs, and they look the business. They look the part. They look just like a server, but with my branding on the front, and they look perfect. So that's great, because it means that the conversation goes away from the unit. That doesn't even get raised as a thing. That's just a seamless part of it, and then the conversation is all around, or does it deliver what you say it delivers, which is more the kind of software side of things, and then the business side, which is like, well, is this of sufficient value to us as a business for us to actually pay for it? And being able to fast track through that hardware part was super valuable. I would have probably still been in the garage trying to do it without the help of somebody like Protocase. Yeah. So when you guys said, hey, would you be interested in talking about it? Yeah, absolutely, because it's been so helpful and so kind of helpful in terms of fast tracking that process on the physical side, which can be it was a real pain until I found you. Yeah.
I thank you. That was an incredible story. There's a few things I want to kind of unpack out of that, because it definitely, again, going back to that very broad CV that you have, but it all does kind of connect to me. You lived in the management consulting world, then the traditional legacy police force. These are very slow-moving, non-innovative organizations, then transitioning into much more innovative organizations. And I would imagine, by the sounds of it, falling in love with that, and then specializing in security, and then eventually ending up with Cloudflare. You were who is now your customer. So you knew the pain acutely that you were trying to solve, and it ties everything together so well, and you can absolutely paint the picture of how you got to founding RackFalcon. It's fascinating. I love how, again, like I talk about this all the time. I'm like a broken record on this podcast, but there's so much commonality in our guests, and I love hearing it. You explained it so well. This concept of how you move through projects effectively using velocity. And the very first thing you said you did was you made your list. And all you were doing is you were identifying what we would call your unknowns, right? Finding out what are the things that you got to figure out, and then trying to move along whatever you possibly could quicker through using a vendor or asking ChatGPT or what have you to increase the velocity at which you can resolve those unknowns. And that's how you were able to produce something in, a very short amount of time that's now in use in 3 multinational companies. It's amazing, right? It's just so fascinating, and I'm curious. That's my language around it, right? And you pointed out, and I appreciate how we were able to help you with that. We like to call this the manufacturing methodology that we use to help our customers, high velocity mass customization. And it's absolutely to facilitate what your needs were. You have other things to worry about, and we want to accelerate your project forward in the way that we can for the stuff that should be simple. And it's so interesting that your explanation of the scenario you were in is almost exactly the scenario that founded this company. A very similar story. 2 co-founders, Doug and Steve, were sitting around having a beer, a cold beverage after a game of hockey, and they were really struggling with exactly this, getting professional enclosures made without having to either hack it up themselves or go out to a million vendors. And this is the idea they came up with, and it was there's an exact parallel with you working for Cloudflare, starting a business to solve your own problem, and them doing that. It's serendipitous to me, and it's so interesting.
Yeah, and I'm glad that they did it in terms of they got on with it and made that a business, because it's definitely, for me, it was transformative in terms of it's fast tracking that piece of the process. The bit that I would add to it is if you go back just even 2 or 3 years ago, I don't think I would have been able to achieve a fully working system largely on my own. A little bit of help from different people, but a lot of 95% on my own, because I've had the help of AI. But it is almost useless when it comes to anything in the physical world. Like if you ask it, how do I put a enclosure together? Like, it is the stuff that comes out of it is absolute garbage. And so it's like it just really struggles with that sort of 3D space. And so where you can put it to good use is where it's used to operating, I guess, which is small pieces of coding. And then you provide the architecture for how should that go together, and then you can iterate fast on that. But where it's really poor is anything physical. And so, like, I was facing exactly what you've just described, the founders, which is like, this should be easy. Like, it feels like it should be easy, but it's so painful, and it's starting to really drive me mad, because it's taking so long. And I've just something really simple, like, okay, I need a standard US plug socket. Okay, what's that? Oh, you see something, I don't know, like, tell me. And then, but okay, which one? Now there's 20 different types, and like, okay, but now how exactly, what's the distance between the screws to mount that on a panel? Okay, but there's 4 different types of these. And so before you know it, something that should be really simple, feels like it should be simple. I just need a power and a network port on the back. Okay, but which one, which type, what? It soon starts burning time and becomes really frustrating. So it's not just the time, but it's like, how painful is this? And so you really do. I've benefited a lot from. Even I had that engineering background, but I didn't have a specific, the background in specifically putting these pieces together. And so, like, trying to find someone that did, like John, who could just go, okay, well, probably this. Is that good for you? And I'm like, yeah, that's perfect. Let's move on to the next one. That means that you can move kind of rapidly down that list or across a row. And so it's just really, really powerful. And the only other thing that I would say is, and a lot of people speak to this around, if you're trying to build something, done is better than perfect. And so you can iterate forever on a tiny piece of code to make it slightly better, but like you have to have in your mind, like, this needs to get out the door at some point. So or the front end, like I can make this a bit nicer looking, or this would be beautiful in this color. Like at some point, you just need to just move on to the next piece, the next row, because otherwise you will never get to the bottom of that list, and it will never quite work. And there's, how long are you gonna? There's normally some sort of financial pressure to. You need to get on with it. It's not a hobby. If it is a hobby, that's fine. You can sort of take as long as you like and then enjoy the process. But if it's not, then you need to get on with it, and you need to find ways to get each of those rows done to a level that you're happy with, but it doesn't have to be perfect, and you come back to that and perfect it later.
Yeah, it's such a great point. We have a project development methodology that we follow internally here, and we call it Project DNA, and there's all kinds in that. We talk about reducing latencies as a way, because latencies kill projects. You need momentum. When you're waiting on something for a month, it just kills things. We also talk a great deal about the idea of scoping down and finding good enough. And that's exactly what I hear in that, is you have to find what's good enough, because otherwise you could spend the rest of your life spinning your tires on little tweaks and really get no benefit from it.
Yeah, it's like you could spend 80% of your time on that last 10%, and is that last 10% really making the difference between what? Like it comes back to, what are you trying to achieve here? Are you trying to achieve a perfect system which no one is interested in, or are you trying to make a system which is functional and then passes that bar in terms of doesn't look like a hobby side project? And so for each of those rows, and very much on the physical side, it was like, what are we trying to, or what am I trying to achieve, and to what level is quite key. So just like you said, really, in your much better way of putting it, is that can I scope down here? I don't necessarily need some sort of massive LiDAR system. Okay, great, that would do it. That would if I put a tiny little Waymo inside a rack, that would tell me exactly what's around it. And now I need a whole load of additional computer vision. No. I'll be here for years. So it's finding what is the minimum piece for that particular row that will get me that row made green, basically, so that I can get that whole list go green, and then if I do that, the whole system should work.
Absolutely.
And that was a goal, and it was just a case of being kind of just brutal, if that's even a sentence, on each of those rows, and say, no, okay, enough, next row, let's move on, and come back later. But yeah, it's also really satisfying though. I mean, that makes it sound as if it's sort of a complete grind and awful. It's not, because what you were doing with each of those rows that you make go green is you make a little bit of progress, and you go, okay, I've managed that tiny little bit of code, or I've that little piece on the dashboard. Oh, camera's lit up, and each little piece of progress, the Protocase box arrives, and you think, oh, shit, is this gonna work? Is it gonna all fit? Is it gonna fit in the rack? Is it And then when it does, you're like, oh, another piece. I'm another row closer. And then you finally have a working system, which after you've celebrated yourself, I've done it. This thing that I've been talking about for the best part of 3 years, trying to build it internally at Cloudflare, coming up with what would I do, then actually how would I do it, and then working down this list to get there. And so it's a pretty long, obsessed journey. Finally, there's a moment where, okay, this actually works, and this is actually doing what I wanted. And if this existed when I was back at Cloudflare, I would have bought, 300 and been backed to buy it, given the budget to buy 300 of these. straight away. That's before expansion. Just get going. Now, whether they do now, I don't know, because there's different people. But just getting to that final moment is pretty special. Like, you've actually built the thing that you, and in fact, it's half the battle. Even if after all these pilots it doesn't go anywhere, I still will have got over the line. I will have built the thing that was annoying me for 3 years. I've put that to bed. Great. If people want to, I'm hoping they like it as much as I do, and they want to be interested and purchase this and finally know exactly who, how long, and what for people were at their equipment for. I'm hoping there are other people that are experiencing the same sort of pain that I was. But if there's not, I still got there. I still made it. I still got an enterprise grade system. But there's a lot of help around now, especially now. There's a lot of help around how can you do all those different rows. A lot of it you can do yourself now, or learn how to. And so, yeah, like your pair of founders is a classic example. So they didn't just finish the hockey game and then watch another hockey game. They were like, oh, I need to this needs to be a thing, and that is the sort of founder mentality. It's a kind of, this will be a thing, and then we will see whether other people like it or not. But I'm going to make it a thing first. And so, yeah.
No, Richard, I think I couldn't have said it any better. I mean, it's such an incredible story. I think it is a great success. I mean, I'm really excited to see where you're going next. I know you kind of gave some hints to that there with some reviews, and you have your pilots, and yeah, it's I truly think that you're onto something, and your energy and your understanding of what the solution needs to be. I think it'll lead to tremendous success, and I'm excited to watch. Before we conclude, I wanted to run you through our rapid fire segment. A list of rapid fire questions. Yeah. First thing that pops into your head. How's that sound?
Okay. Yeah, no, sounds good. Yeah, let's do it.
First question. Coffee or tea?
Definitely coffee, despite the accent. Definitely coffee.
Coffee, wow.
And American coffee, actually, yeah.
That was a surprise.
Yeah.
Favorite book?
I don't really have a favorite book. I read a lot of news and online stuff, but I struggle to read books. I don't really have a favorite book.
No, that's totally good. Fine answer. You're too focused on getting the updates done to your code.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
But I don't have I think the patience is an issue. It takes so many hours, and I get faster. If I don't like it, I've just invested 10 hours already. I'm like,
Richard, I have the same problem. Best advice you've ever received?
I think we've covered this actually, but it wasn't me that just came up with it. It was someone that told me the done or good enough is way better than perfect. This was one of my manager's bosses back at Uber gave me that, and there's another one which was in Uber, and it really frustrated me at the time, but in hindsight it was bang on. But about every third conversation then would be, does it scale? Is it scalable? Is this process scalable? Every time you wanted to do anything, they would say that. And to every tiny little piece of it, you're like, look, it's just an email. And they go, no, is it scalable? And so that those two things put together are like the best piece of advice, I think, that were jumped into me in sort of post-police land, which was to get over the line, stop, get something out the door and get it scalable.
Yeah. I think that's really sound advice, especially for anybody who's listening and maybe thinking about founding their own business. I think that would be tremendously helpful. One person in history who you'd like to meet?
Well, he's still around, and it's a bit of a cheesy answer, I suppose, but I would really like to meet Bill Gates, because he's a kind of old school founder of the whole tech thing. I also I'm sort of fascinated by in the past year, I've built this thing, and like I say, a lot of that has been with AI help. He had none of that. He was trying to put things together in his goes. Where does he go to? There's not even an internet. Like, well, how do you do that? How do you find out where to even start? And so I'd love to talk to him about that. And I also just like the way, like, you see some of these billionaires that like to enjoy themselves by putting themselves into space. He doesn't do that. I see him, putting money into helping the world and trying to solve diseases and stuff. So I've got a lot of time for him, really, because I like the way he's using his, or at least what I see of it, he seems to be using a lot of his wealth for good. And so those two things together, I would like to share a beer with him and just ask him, how on earth did you start when there's no internet to kind of go to? Where do you go to? It can't be libraries. I can't imagine. What's he going to do? Go down the library and look at old books to try to figure out? It must be incredibly slow. And so I'd love to know how that worked.
That's a really great answer. Last one, New Year's resolution.
So again, a slightly boring one, sadly, but it's to get back to the gym. I kind of fall in and out of it over periods. It's normally to do with how busy I am at work. If I'm less busy, I get a bit buffer as I have more time. But then this year I've turned into a sort of coding weakling, and it's not a look that I'm loving right now. So yeah, I should be one of those people that they market to by putting the prices up in January. That would be particularly for me as I walk in there and go, oh, it just happens to be January. But yeah, I'd like to get back, and I'm also, as years advance, and I'm no spring chicken, the gym is actually more important than it ever was. So I need to get back in that. Yeah, that's the resolution.
That's a good one, a solid one. Well, Richard, I can't say enough how much I enjoyed this. I would love to have you back on in the future. I know that there's a lot of moving pieces for you right now, and probably a lot of excitement and new developments on the horizon. Anytime, I'd love to have you back and we can discuss further. I'm curious though, if folks listening are looking to find out more about RackFalcon, where would they do that?
Yeah, they can just go to our website, which is rackfalcon.com, and then that will take you through the process. There's obviously a contact us button, or you can just contact me at Richard or team at rackfalcon.com and contact me directly. We're in a sort of pilot phase. There's always space for another keen, interested pilot if people are interested to want to actually see what all this fuss was about. But yeah, there's a small amount of space for other pilots if interested.
Absolutely. I can't wait to hear more. And thank you so much for coming on. Until next time, bye-bye.
Great. Thanks very much. Cheers.